Okay, Ms. Cox and Mr. Jones are in charge of the work-study program for Oak High School. Each teacher is in charge of supervising 10 students. They are comparing statistics for the two groups of students based on the hours worked per week. Which statement is true? So what we have over here is a list. These are all of the students that Ms. Cox supervises. Like student 1 works 10 hours, student 2 works 15 hours, student 3 works 17 hours, and so on. And then these are the students that Mr. Jones supervises, and their hours worked are recorded in this table. Now, each statement asks about the mean, the median, and the interquartile range. So instead of doing those separately by hand, it's better if you know how to type the data in the calculator and let it do all of this data for you at once. Okay, so to type the data in, you will go to your calculator and you will press Stat and then Edit. And then in L1, you'll put all of the numbers that were in your first column. And then in L2, you'll put all of the numbers that were in your second column. Okay, does everybody have the data typed in? Once the data is typed in, you'll go back to Stat, but this time you'll go over to Calc for Calculate. Now, this is one variable statistics because the only variable involved in this scenario is hours worked. Okay, they're not comparing hours to anything else. We're only looking at hours worked. That's why it's one variable. So you hit Enter. Now, where I did this last period, mine's still showing up as L2. But if I want to get the data for Ms. Cox's students that she's supervising, I put that data in L1. How do we change this to L1? Right, second, and then look above the 1, there's a little L1 right there, and then it changed it. Once you do that, you go down to Calculate and press Enter. Okay, and then it shows you all the data. The mean is what? Right, and then they also want to know about the median and the interquartile range. Hold on one second. Okay, so the mean is 14.5. The median is 14.5 also. And isn't the median the same thing as Q2? And then they also want to know the interquartile range, which is IQR. Does anybody remember how to calculate IQR? Q3 minus Q1. Okay? So that would be 17 minus 10, which is 7. Your interquartile range should always be positive, which is why you do Q3 first, then minus Q1. That means you'd reverse. You just basically, it's the same number, you just take off the negative sign. Okay, because think about it. Had you accidentally done Q1 minus Q3, it would have been 10 minus 17, which is negative 7. So, but your IQR should always be a positive number. Okay, now let's look at Mr. Jones' class. Where did we put that data in the calculator? L2. So I go back to Stat, back over to Calc. It's still one variable because the only thing we're talking about here is hours worked. But now I need to make the list show up as L2. And how do I do that? Second, and then the number 2, because above it you'll see L2 right there in blue. Then I go down to Calculate and I hit Enter. What is the mean for his students? 20.2 hours. Okay, then what is the median for his students? 21. And what is the IQR for his students? 10. Q3 is 25, Q1 is 15. When you subtract those, you get 10. So his median, which is also known as Q2, was what? 21. And the IQR for his data was 10. Now that we have all of the information that's discussed in the statements, we can decide which one is true. A says the mean for Ms. Cox's class is greater than the mean for Mr. Jones. No, hers is definitely a smaller number when it comes to mean. B says the median for Mr. Jones' class is greater. Yes, he has a median of 21 while she only has a median of 14.5. So this is the true statement. I'll try to do a warm-up once a week that involves you typing in data so that you'll remember how to do it on the EOC. Okay, now turn in your packets to page 14. What numbers did we do yesterday? Okay, so let's start with number 2. 14. Okay, the directions on this page are to solve the following using the quadratic formula. What do you check first when doing the quadratic formula? Okay, let's just pretend like it can't. We're just going to do all of these quadratic formula. So what do we do first if we're using quadratic formula? But even before that, what should you check first? No, the first thing you should make sure is that it's set equal to 0. Because remember, if it's not, you have to use inverse operations to move things so that it will be set equal to 0. But since it is, we locate the A, B, and C. What is the A? What is the B? And the C? Negative 140. Okay, then what do you do? Correct. You do B squared minus 4AC, and what is that number called, or what is that called? Well, the whole thing is the quadratic formula, but within it, the B squared minus 4AC part also has a special name. Discriminant. Okay, so in the B place, we plug in a 1. In the A place, we plug in a 3. And in the C place, we plug in a negative 140. Now calculate that and tell me what you get. Okay. Now, besides the discriminant being part of the quadratic formula and you having to do it, what else does it help you with? What other information does it provide? Well, right, you have to do it because it's part of the formula. But what other information does it provide for us? How many solutions? If your discriminant is a positive number, if it's greater than 0, you're going to have 2 solutions. So to find those 2 solutions, we now continue on with the quadratic formula. X equals negative B. Well, our B is 1, so that becomes a negative 1. Plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4AC, which we already did and got correct. And then all divided by 2 times A. And what is your A value? 3. So 2 times that will become 6. Okay, now to find the actual solutions, you type it in twice because there's 2 of them. The first time you type it in, you use the plus sign. The second time you type it in, you use the minus. To type it in, what do you do first? Alpha y equals n over d because it's a fraction. Okay? So alpha y equals okay, and in the numerator it's negative 1 plus the square root of what? 1,681. And then over what? 6. Okay, say though that you're taking this test and all choices are decimals. How do we change that to a decimal? What? Okay, you can. You can just literally type in 20 divided by 3, enter, or you can do alpha y equals 4 and hit enter, and it'll change it to a decimal. 6.7. Now, that's rounded, so it's approximately 6.7. How do we find the second answer now? Well, this time, no. This time, instead of using plus from the plus or minus sign, you use the minus. So alpha y equals n over d, and you get negative 1 minus, this time, the square root of 1,681 over 6. Since it's a whole number, you must have put your negative inside the root or something. Did you use a negative right here instead of a minus? Okay, you get -7, and so that is exactly -7, so equals -7. No, because we didn't round. That's not approximately. It is -7. Okay, now, once you've done all that work, what's the best way to know if you're right? Just graph it. Put in your calculator 3x squared plus x minus 140. So y equals 3x squared, and then is it plus x? And then minus 140? And when you graph it, it'll be a parabola because it's a quadratic equation. And see how on the left side it crossed exactly at -7? And on the right side, it crosses between 6 and 7, but closer to the 7. So wouldn't that be the 6.7 answer you got? So that's the best way to check it and know that you've done it right, because it crosses at those locations that you got for your answers. Okay, number 4. Number 4. This one could be completed by the A times C method, but since we're working on quadratic formula, we'll just do it. What's the A? What's the B? And what's the C? Okay, so now we do the discriminant. B squared minus 4 times A times C. The B place we put 5. The A place we put 3. The C place we put 2. Calculate that for me. One. Now, that number is greater than 0, so we're going to have 2 solutions. So now, x equals negative b, which would become a -5, plus or minus the square root of 1, all over what? 6. Because if your a is 3, when you multiply it by that 2, you get 6. Now, look up at the board so you don't get confused. When you type this in, couldn't you just go ahead and type in -5 plus 1 over 6 and -5 minus 1 over 6? Because the square root of 1 is 1. So you could go ahead and simplify that if you want. If you don't, it's fine. So now, go ahead and type them both in and let me know what you get. One of them's an exact answer. One of them's approximately. -0.7 and well, I wrote them backwards then. Because the -1 will go with the equal sign because it's exactly, and then -0.7. Okay, y'all want to try one by yourself before I do it with you? Okay, try number 5. All right, the A is 10, the B is 9, the C is -15. So in the B place, you put 9, in the A place 10, and the C place -15. And what did y'all get for your discriminant? Let me try it. Yeah, it's 681. Well, somebody didn't get it, so I was just checking it. Okay, so now look, we do -b, so that would be -9 plus or minus the square root of 681, all divided by what? 20. And you do your 2 times your A value of 10. Now you just type it in. First, you type in -9 plus the square root of 681 over 20. Then you type in -9 minus the square root of 681 over 20. So type them in if you haven't already. Okay, for negative 9 plus the square root of 681 over 20, you get 0.9. And then when you do negative 9 minus the square root of 681 over 20, you get what? Negative 1.8. Okay, try number 6. A is what? B is? And C is? Okay, so in the B place it'll be negative 4 squared minus 4 times 3 times negative 119. And what did you get for the discriminant? 1,444. Okay, and that's the discriminant, which will go up under the square root in the formula. Look, what happens when your B is already negative? Right, and then what will 2a become? Then when you type in 4 plus the square root of 1,444 over 6, what do you get? Exactly 7. What about 4 minus the square root of 1,444? Negative 0.57. Okay. All right, number 7. We got 4 more to do and then we'll be done. There's some up here. You used a negative sign instead of a minus on the minus 4ac part. Okay, number 7. What's the A? Guys, what's the A on number 7? What's the B? And what's the C? So we'll do B squared minus 4AC. And that's 8 squared minus 4. Make sure you put a minus in the calculator right here and not a negative. Minus 4 times 6 times negative 2. And what does that become? $112. Okay, and since that's a number greater than 0, we're going to have 2 solutions. To find the 2 solutions, you do negative b plus or minus the square root of the discriminant, which we now know is 112, all over what? 12. 2 times 6 is 12. Now type that in to find your actual solutions. Number 9 is simple. Okay, has anybody typed in negative 8 plus the square root of 112 over 12? Okay, Sion, what'd you get? Exactly negative 7? Let me type it in. Come up here so I can see what you're typing in. Okay, when I did the plus, I got approximately 0.2. Yeah, you did. Okay, then when I type it in with the minus the square root of 112, yeah, you get approximately negative 1.5. Well, yeah, I'm just rounding. All right, number 8. What is the A? What is the B? And what is the C? So you'll do B squared minus 4 times A times C, which is negative 2 squared minus 4 times 8 times negative 12. And what does that become? 388. And since that's the number greater than 0, you're going to have how many solutions? 2. So it'll start out x equals what, Josh? X equals what? Your b is already negative. So when you plug it in the formula, it turns it into a positive 2. Plus or minus the square root of what, Marcus? What goes up under here? Good. All divided by what? 16. Now you just type it in. 2 plus the square root of 388, all divided by 16, and that gives you so 1.4. And then you do 2 minus the square root of 388 divided by 16, and you get what? Negative 1.1. Okay, 2 more and then we'll be done. Yeah, the whole next page. All right. Number 9. What is the A? Pay attention, this one's different. 2. What is the B? Very good. 0, and the C is 11. Because look, there's no linear term in it. Like there's no b to the first, or in this case, n to the first. So it must have been a 0n. What? Naya, I couldn't hear you. What are you asking? Negative 1.1. Okay, so now, does everybody understand for this one why the A is 2, the B is 0, and the C is 11? So now you just do it as normal. B squared minus 4AC. So your B is 0, your A is 2, your C is 11, and that makes a discriminant of what? What happens when your discriminant is a negative number, less than 0? No solution. To have one solution, the discriminant has to equal what? 0. If it's greater than 0, there's 2. If it's less than 0, there's none. If it's exactly 0, there's 1. Now, on a graph, what would this look like? What would happen? Right, it wouldn't hit the x-axis anywhere. There would be no x-intercepts. All right, number 10. What is the A? What is the B? And what is the C? So we'll do b squared minus 4ac. In the b place we put a negative 6, in the a place a 1, in the c place a negative 19. And that becomes what? 112. And since that's a positive number, greater than 0, we're going to have how many solutions? Okay, so what do I write? Right. Over 2. Because your A is 1, so 2 times 1 is 2. Now to find the 2 solutions, you just type them in. 6 plus the square root of 112 divided by 2 is 8.3. I think you're a little distracted. 6 minus the square root of 112 divided by 2 is what? Negative 2.3.